All right, we're going to go ahead and get started now. I know people are still filtering in from the hallway, but why don't we go ahead and we have a very full session, some great content with some great customer speakers. My name is Rob Chang, Director of Platform Product Marketing from Salesforce.com. We're very fortunate today to have some distinguished speakers with us, Leonard Hughes and Joe Aiello from British Columbia Lottery Corporation, and they'll be speaking in the second part of this session. Before we get started, of course, everyone's seen the safe harbor statement, so please only make purchasing decisions based on features that are available in the product today. So we're going to start off. I'm going to show a handful or a couple of handfuls of use cases to help set the context for the discussion about what kinds of applications and application characteristics are a good fit for cloud computing and for Force.com specifically. I'll briefly talk about some non-functional considerations as well, and then we'll have our customer speakers come out and give you their own experiences and their own best practices around rationalizing your application portfolio for the cloud. And we'll try to leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. So I know many people I've talked to in the past and today at the Expo floor, they often talk about how they're very clear that cloud computing is a very good model. It's it's multi-tenant, it's elastic, it's going to scale with their business. But they have trouble understanding, but where do I start first? If I want to evaluate this platform, if I want to do a proof of concept, they need some guidance around, what's a good fit for the type of application I could use to really evaluate how this works. And there's a lot of different ways to answer this question. One way that I found very useful is to first talk about what other customers and users have done in deploying successful applications on Force.com. The real sweet spot for a lot of our customers has been finding applications that are really meant to model, manage, and automate common core business functions. And I'll give you some examples of that. Fujitsu developed this order management and invoicing application that allowed sales reps to actually generate invoicing PDF and send it directly to a customer from within their opportunity in Salesforce. Customer portals, Compass Learning actually built this public knowledge base and self-service support portal to help offload some of the work from their own service call representatives. We also have companies that are doing things like ERP. I don't know if you've heard of Vitrazo. They'll be speaking tomorrow morning at the platform keynote. They actually run their entire business. They have a recycled glass countertop business, everything from manufacturing, materials, their machinery and equipment and provisioning, all the way down to supply chain ordering on Force.com. Ascent, this is an application built by Precisio. They're actually in the expo hall if you want to see this application. They do inventory management, complete with integration with barcode scanning PDAs. Coda has developed this application to do custom accounting, invoicing, cash management. And actually, if you go down to the expo floor, you can also see the new Financial Force application. Fairsail actually built a HR application to do talent management, to be able to do things like performance reviews, skills and competencies, and future growth plans. And this is one of many examples in the HR area. You have a lot of customers doing things like paid time off and benefits and hiring. In the legal space, Apttus, which also is one of the partners in our expo floor, built this contract management application so they can send off NDAs and other contracts and make sure that they've been approved before they go forward. On the compliance side, RiskConnect built this very interesting and custom user interface to manage risk compliance, risk management and compliance with their corporate risk policy standards. And then in the IT management space, this is a custom application built to manage an agile software development process, an internal Scrum with card stories and burn down charts, card walls. And also e-commerce. This is an application was built for Promethean. As you can see, it's a very rich interactive user interface, drag and drop to basically select products these are for educational products sold into classrooms, into schools, and to put them in your shopping cart, which are then synchronized and sent off to a third party for distribution and fulfillment. So these are some of the examples, sort of the very common, very well understood categories of what Force.com has been used for by customers. But I should also mention that that's only a very small percentage of the total number of types of applications that customers are building. Force.com applications really do display this long tail effect where many applications actually don't fit into those nice, easy to define categories. And this is based on an internal study, internal survey we did of 1,000 Force.com customers. You can see there isn't really any one category that breaks 10 or 12% of customer usage. So they have some very unique business processes out there, like Author Solutions. This company is responsible for 1 in every 19 books published in the United States. And they built out a complete automation system for self-service publishing. Everything from editorial decisions all the way through cover art and distribution. Schumacher Group built this. This is a mashup with some of the Google Maps technology to do ER staffing in response to crises, like a hurricane or a virus outbreak. Where are the doctors and the nurses nearby these emergency room locations? The government of Japan actually built out this EcoPoints rebate processing website, served 20 million consumers in Japan, basically giving them credit for buying energy-efficient appliances. MyLoanBiz automates their entire mortgage brokerage business on Force.com. And finally, our last example, this application by Model Metrics, built with the Adobe Air client technology, was used for pharmaceutical reps to go out into the field. They can track sales calls, doctors they meet with. They can also keep track of the drug samples that they've been able to give to the different providers and the different doctors. And you can see they also have signature capture in their application. So that's just a handful of the 130,000 plus applications that have been deployed successfully on Force.com. And the reason that it's useful to look at these is we can talk about what those applications actually have in common. And some of the common characteristics that are interesting and will help us to identify what applications in your own backlogs might be a good fit for Force.com. First of all, it has to do with the data model and the data characteristics. So in almost all these applications, what we're looking at is lots and lots of structured data, things like inventory, products, users, people, projects, materials. Right? These are things that you need to be able to track. You need to have data integrity enforced on them. You need to be able to do searching, auditing, ad hoc querying, and reporting to be able to manage that business process on top of that data. Secondly, there's a core business process that's being managed and modeled and automated in almost all of these cases. And that could involve things like a data-driven workflow. So if a case has been sitting too long without a response, it could be automatically moved in a higher priority queue. Or if there was an overdue invoice, it could be the owner could be automatically changed to another owner. Human approval processes, in Vitrazo's case, adding a new supplier to their supply chain may require approval from a vice president. And also many of these applications exhibit the need to have real integration either at the UI layer, at the logic layer, and or at the data layer with other business systems. So you could have many examples where you have master customer information, master account information coming from like SAP backend system into Salesforce. There could be calls out through the Web Services API to external shipping third parties such as UPS or FedEx. Third, these applications tend to have what I would call enterprise user management requirements or characteristics. And what that means is these applications have to support user administration, adding, removing, and provisioning users. Often these users have different views or different levels of access on the data in the system. So you have to have very granular access control, ability to control object level, record level, field level control into the data. And also, they all often have to be able to manage hierarchies, understand the relationship between different users. So that, for example, a manager in HR can always see all of the job recs opened by any of the managers below them or any of the employees below them. So that ability to understand hierarchy and manage sharing models is something that many of these applications have in common. And finally, user interface. So Salesforce.com and the Force.com platform was really designed and optimized around making it very easy for business users or non-technical users to get the most out of the application. I think you saw that with some of the demonstrations that we did this morning at the keynote. It's meant to be very intuitive and not require lots and lots of training to get up and started and be productive with the application. Also, with respect to the users, oftentimes these are global employees or global communities of users, so they have to be able to easily support multiple languages and multiple currencies. And they need to be able to reach the users, sales representatives or other users, wherever they are, whatever device they're using, whether it be through the web client, through your iPhone, your BlackBerry, or maybe an offline rich client like we saw with the pharmaceutical application. So these are the kind of things that these applications really had to make it a good fit for the platform. And you'll see that in looking at these, the reason that they're all up here is because these are actually the types of features that were needed to make our Sales Cloud and our Service Cloud really world-class CRM applications. But they were designed in a way that they're easily generalizable. So they were designed as generic platform features so that you can leverage all of these features in your own custom applications. So it's one thing to say, here's a bunch of things that would make an application a good fit, but it really isn't telling you much unless we also talk about, so what does that imply about what kind of applications don't really fit the model or aren't really in the sweet spot for the platform. And I find it very useful to use that same structure that we used before. So starting at the bottom, what kind of characteristics about the data really don't fit really well with the Force.com platform. So heavily non-relational data, unstructured data. So large video, audio files, software binaries. I should say, of course, with content, we do have a very good solution for unstructured documents. But when it comes to very large binaries and video files, it's really not a real good fit. Write-only applications. So there's a whole set of applications where the model of relational database, the traditional model about relational database and what it's really optimized to do to be able to support this ad hoc reporting and querying may not be the right model for the application. And one example of this are RFID inventory logs where you're just constantly adding new entries into the logs. You're never deleting any of those, and you're almost never querying against any of those. You could implement that on a relational database, but I think a lot of architects would find that there may be other models, other database, non-relational database models that would be a better fit for that type of data, those type of data. So secondly, we talked about how the real good fit for the platform are business process-oriented applications. So on the flip side, applications that really aren't modeling or automating any kind of business process may not be the best fit. So one example, content-only websites. Yes, you could build it out with sites, but you're not necessarily leveraging the strengths of the platform. This is in contrast to websites that actually do either grab some data back from the database. Maybe you're trying to get real-time information about products or suppliers or inventory and publish some of that out to the public website. That would be a good fit for the platform. Or if you're doing some kind of forms where you're trying to capture lead data, again, that would be a good fit. But if your only role for this project is, we just have this content and it's pretty static and it just stays out there and it doesn't have to have a database on the back end, it's probably not the best fit for the strengths of the platform. Gaming applications seems like a pretty obvious one. The other thing I would say is that this notion of raw computing, so basically number crunching applications where you initiate some kind of a job or some kind of a transaction and you walk away and it just runs, it just churns. Another word for this is basically CPU-bound type applications. By that I mean, you're doing physics or scientific applications, protein folding, you're doing Fourier transforms, you're letting them run for hours or days. Brute force code breaking. I saw this very interesting article about how Amazon EC2 was used to help brute force some lost passwords that a customer had. If you're just doing core processing and you're not leveraging any of the other components about reporting, analytics, workflow, UI, that's something that maybe EC2 would be a better choice for. Another example of that would be some kind of multi-dimensional analysis. When we get up to the user level, an example of a type of application that wouldn't be a real good fit are those that just don't have many users. Ultimately, they're doing some kind of data mining, you're doing video encoding. Again, it's not something where you're taking advantage of the security, the sharing rules, the user management capabilities of the platform, and there's probably an alternative that you want to look for that type of application. And finally, and relatedly, an application that has no user interface at all. And by that, what we're really talking about is projects that are kind of system-level integration hubs or engines or projects that actually sit in the middle of a bunch of plumbing in the IT organization. You know, it doesn't have users, doesn't have user interface. These really are not the ideal applications for Force.com. So we talked about, you know, sort of the ideal profile, what applications would be a good fit, what kind of characteristics would make an application not necessarily a good fit for the platform. I'd like to take a couple moments also to talk about non-functional requirements. A lot of times people aren't so sure, you know, can I really trust my application to the cloud with respect to performance or reliability or availability? And I think Mark and others touched on this morning, but I just want to talk about briefly the fact that on Force.com you really are being able to leverage an enterprise class, enterprise scale platform and infrastructure. You know, over the years, we've actually been able to reduce the amount of time it takes us to respond to requests, even as the number of customers and the number of transactions that we're processing every day is growing significantly. So we're up to 150 to 100 million transactions every day. You know, that we saw earlier, we're at 68,000 customers or something along those lines. And our performance and our response time has continued to improve. Reliability. So not only do we have very high reliability of our platform, in fact, this is missing a couple of nines because now that Mark has announced the 5-minute downtime. But what's also important about this is we're pretty unique in actually providing full transparency about our system status on trust.salesforce.com. And that's not just for our customers, that's not just for authenticated users. Anybody can go, prospects, people who are just curious, can go to trust.salesforce.com. You can see not only current performance metrics, but also historical system status and metrics. Backup disaster recovery. Again, as Mark touched on this morning, we have 3 global mirror data centers. They're warm backups, so if anything happens, you can immediately pick it up with very little downtime on one of the backup data centers. Dedicated network backbone, carrier agnostic. So all those capabilities are built into what you get on top of the platform with this infrastructure. And world-class security. So ISO 27001. Many of our customers have done comprehensive security audits with us. These are including financial and banking customers. Some of the most sensitive security and firewall vendors out there have done these types of audits. And you know, they've walked through our data centers. They've seen the physical security. We've done audits and analyses of our network security, of our application level security. So that's really, at a high level, you know, the types of characteristics that would technically mean that your application is really a sort of a good candidate, I would say, to be looking at maybe trying it out with Force.com. But I also wanted to say that, you know, there's a lot more to picking a good first application, a good pilot application, than just, you know, is it technically a good fit. There's a lot of other things you need to consider. Things like how does it work with integrating existing environments? You know, what are the particular needs of your users, the experience, the organizational situation, how important those applications are, how quickly you need them up, how important availability and downtime is, how do you manage the changes, both in migrating to the new application and changes going forward, and how do you communicate those changes. And so in order to talk about this, I'd like to invite up to the stage Lynette Hughes, the VP of Business Transformation for VCLC, and Joy Yellow, Director of Corporate Systems Group for VCLC. Please give them a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Canada, so I have a question to ask you right off the bat. How many hockey fans do we have in the room? How many figure skating fans? Not as many? That's my passion. British Columbia Lottery Corporation is very proud to be a sponsor of the 2010 Olympics, which we're going to be hosting in Vancouver in February. So the eyes of the world will be directed towards my home province, so it's going to be very exciting. So if you want to know where British Columbia Lottery Corporation is, it's in Canada. That's up north of here. And we are on the west coast. We have 2 offices in British Columbia. We have our sales and marketing that's out of our Vancouver area office, and then we have Kamloops office, which is our head office where Joe and I work out of. And it's just north of the wine country in southern BC. So if you ever want to come visit, it's a great place to get some great wine. So who are we? We had the mandate to do all gambling within the province of BC. So that spans anywhere from all our lottery product, and you have Mega Millions and Powerball here in the States. Is that correct? Do you play? Good. So an equivalent, is the sound okay? Equivalent that we have in Canada is 649. That's our national lottery game. We also sell all kinds of different lottery products, Keno, scratch and win tickets, some games that are specific to BC. We handle all the casinos in the province, and we have some very beautiful casinos, very nice facilities with lounges, very kind of similar to what you see in Vegas. Our Chances brand is actually our bingo business. Now, what are your first thoughts about bingo? Smoky, not very nice facilities. We actually have people come all over the world to look at our bingo facilities in British Columbia because they're quite upscale. They have lounges. You can go and watch sports games, food and beverages there. So it's something we're very proud of in our province. And the last area that we work in is playnow.com, which is our online presence. And the western part of Canada, which is us, and the eastern part of Canada are the only two licensed jurisdictions in North America that are allowed to sell gambling products online. So we sell lottery. You can register online and never miss a draw. Bingo, scratch and win type games. So it's a very exciting space for us to be in. So within our business, we generate about $2.6 billion worth of revenue, and it goes back to health and education. So we're very proud of what we put back into the government coffers in our province. And my job within the British Columbia Lottery Corporation is I'm Vice President of Business Transformation. So I'm there to modernize the company, to get it ready for the next wave of where we're going to. Now, if you came through the airport coming into San Francisco, some of you might have seen, did you see the exhibit on the gambling machines? Anyone see that? Okay, so if you walk along there through that exhibit, you will notice that gambling has not really changed in about 100 years. A slot machine that you saw in that exhibit looks exactly the same as a slot machine that you would see in our casinos in British Columbia. So we are not an industry known for innovation. We're not known as an industry of continuous improvement. And so it's been very interesting to work as someone that's trying to change the organization, not only to help us be more cost effective, but to be able to capture new revenue opportunities as our business is changing. So it's a very exciting time for us at Lottery Corporation. So what we're going to do today, Joe and I, is we're going to talk to you about how do you decide where to start? What applications do you put into the cloud? Joe is going to talk about it more from the technical side of things, sort of the science that went behind it, how do you prioritize it, which applications should go when, how do you sequence it out. And I'm going to come back in and talk to you a little bit about how do you get the buy-in from the different people that you'll be impacting through your organization so that they will let you go in and put those applications on the cloud. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe. Joe has been at every Salesforce.com or Dreamforce conference since it was 500 people, and now it's 19,000. So he has a lot of background in this area.
Thanks, Lynette. So, Joe Aiello, Director of Corporate Systems at BCLC. I'm going to talk today about XML formats and SSL encryption. No, just joking. Since the company BCLC got founded, the focus of the organization has really been predominantly on top-line revenue growth. Subsequently, a lot of the back office, front office systems began to incur a lot of technical debt. And these are some of the pain points that we began to experience. A lot of manual, duplicated processes, just a lot of pain, a lack of agility. because we had incurred a lot of this technical debt, we weren't able to move at the speed that the business wanted us to move at. So rather than being an agile organization, which is what everybody wants to do, wants to become, we were actually moving to become a fragile organization. And at the end of the day, that means that we're not executing efficiently against our projects and programs. Fundamentally, we've got a poor line of sight across the organization. And I started at BCLC about a year and a half ago, and this is what I saw when I came to BCLC. Just a lot of moving parts, a lot of silos, a lot of islands. And to try to build sustainable architecture, sustainable systems across an environment like this truly becomes really complex. And as I point out here is that this, if we continue to have this sort of approach to try to scale the organization, we're not customer-centric, and at the end of the day, we're going to lose market share. So, not really where we want to go. From an IT infrastructure perspective, this is too what I saw. So, in many ways, our systems were a mirror image of a lot of our business processes. So, you cannot build systems in this hamburger helper bolt-on approach. And I don't know if many of you are familiar with Rube Goldberg, but he's a famous cartoonist. And so what this is showing here is that there's, through a series of events, this dog who's carrying this fancy contraption, a pillow will drop between the gentleman and the pavement to brace his fall. Sure, it works, but it's not sustainable and it's not scalable. So I thought this was a good metaphor for IT infrastructure. So it was time for a detour. We obviously did not want to continue down this path. We wanted to be able to scale our systems so that they were sustainable and cost-effective. So we really looked to Salesforce.com to rapidly build out our application portfolio, to deprecate some systems in parallel to building these systems out. We also wanted to have a better total cost of ownership around the applications that we were releasing. And so, working with Salesforce.com, we went through an applications rationalizations process that allowed us to really take a look at where we wanted to go, what we wanted to do, and from that, as Lynette pointed out, we really wanted to transform the business. So business architecture and business process management, to be able to have the clarity, efficiency, and effectiveness across the organization so that we could build what we call these value chains, so that we could take those value chains and modernize our IT infrastructure so that it was consistent, scalable, securable, auditable, all the great buzzwords that you hear. BCLC is a very green company. British Columbia is a very green place. And so we really looked to Salesforce.com to also lower or reduce our total carbon footprint. And we've been successful in that regard. So we knew where we wanted to go. We had a vision. We internalized our needs. And through our needs, we really looked at opportunities where we could actually deploy an application in 90 days. More on that in a minute. We also looked for great business benefit, one that would allow us to scale to really continue to have a large footprint when we move forward. Systems benefit, again, if at all possible, always looking back in our rearview mirror to deprecate systems in parallel. As we're turning the lights off, we also turn the lights on. Receptivity and change management, Lynette will speak to this more, but it's really important that you reach out to a part of your organization that is embracing change. It's been my experience that the best systems in the world are the ones that you're trying to replace because the users may have complained about it for years, but as soon as you're removing it from them, it becomes the best application. And so the change management process is absolutely critical. It's, in fact, probably the most overlooked area, but it's the most important area. And again, having a large footprint, having a large presence, everything that we do is trying to work in concert so that we can scale and sustain the systems infrastructure. So this was the applications rationalization process, and we really looked at this process in two ways with our partners at Salesforce. Taking an IT lens and a business lens, and really mapping those two processes together so that the two shall meet, so that we prioritize and rank that information so that when we could put together a strategy map and then go back to the business, the executive, the board, to be able to socialize the change that we were going to put onto the organization. Oops. There we go. So this was the modernization strategy, and so really we looked to technology to drive a strategy so that we can have a business outcome. And so this is reflective of our modernization strategy from a couple of months ago. It's a living document. This isn't the most current one. But as we were going through this modernization exercise with the business, with IT, with the executive and Salesforce, we quickly found out that a lot of our needs were really being met through things like Salesforce automation, marketing automation, service and support automation. All words that people tend to understand as opposed to trying to come up with your own nomenclature. Really important that you try to match what your needs are to industry recognizable terms. So why does this make sense? Well, it made sense for a number of reasons. As like many of you, we have a large mobile workforce across British Columbia. And so the power to be able to extend Salesforce to a mobile device, a BlackBerry, iPhone, tablet, when our territory managers, account executives, if you will, are reaching out to their customers, being able to update sales information in real time so back office knowledge workers can see that information so that the executive and other management have just the right amount of information to make the right decisions at the right time in a fast-changing environment. Very critical. What that allows the IT organization to do is not have to build that information out, don't have to build out those systems. And so what I've done with some of my teams is rather than building out account, contact, case management systems, it's really having them focus on the integration points between our enterprise architecture that we call the Customer Information Hub and Salesforce.com. So we're going through a master data management exercise. We're moving to a services-oriented architecture. We're doing that to remove a lot of the painful integration points that have haunted us in the past. And through this exercise, we'll be able to have more control over our informational assets and synchronization of data between our back office systems and Salesforce.com. So why are we doing this? We're doing this really to be customer-centric so that if a player or a retailer or one of our constituents calls somebody in the organization, they know who they are. We've got that total view of the customer. And at the end of the day, it builds transparency and accountability for everything that we do. So a few slides ago, I showed you sort of the landscape that I saw when I first came to Salesforce. And so the whole idea of revolution never works. We need to evolve the organization. It's okay that we have all of these islands and silos to begin with. And so we're really looking at Salesforce.com to being that bridge between the islands so that we've got, again, control over our informational assets, that we understand what our value chains are. And so somebody in marketing or somebody in sales or somebody in service and support has got the same information because they're working on the same platform. Very important. So it's equally important as to determine what's on your roadmap. It's just as equally important to determine what's not on your roadmap. And so when we first started looking at Salesforce, you know, we saw all this great stuff. We wanted to release a player portal, retailer portal. Too much too soon. We wanted to really now focus on some of the low-hanging fruit. So we've taken that and just put it on the back burner, and we'll do it at some point in the future. The other system that we looked at was this bingo paper management system, and I won't bore you with it. It's pretty scary. It just, although we could shoehorn this into Salesforce, at the end of the day, it's not Salesforce's core competency. Yes, we could do it, but we chose not to do it because it just didn't make any sense. So we'll take a look at another solution sometime down the road. The point about change management and the best system is the one that you're trying to replace. This is a good example of it. The iTrack Casino Incident Management System is used by our security officers who really work in our casino side of the house. And our security officers are all retired RCMP, so they're sort of like FBI folks, so you don't want to mess with them too much. So it's well adopted, it's well liked. It just didn't make any sense to go take a system that it's doing its job, replacing it and putting in Salesforce. So again, at some point in the future, what we'll do is integrate Salesforce with the iTrack solution to, again, have that clarity, that understanding of information over our informational assets. So with that, I'll pass you on to Lynette Hughes.
Thanks, Joe. So Joe's talked to you about how you went through our rationalization exercise, figured out what that modernization strategy looked like and where we were going. So in our organization, I'm kind of curious with you guys what your situation is, but how many of you find that the business is actually driving you into this new technology in these new areas? Is it the business driving it? And how many of you find it's the IT department driving it? Okay, that's really interesting. In our organization, it's definitely the IT and in the business transformation division that is driving a lot of this change, because as Joe said, in the gambling business, our cost of running the business is very, very low. So to do things more efficiently and more effectively, it's a little bit of a hard sell. So what we try to do at the Lottery Corporation when we're moving down this is trying to get that balance between the science of everything, what Joe talked about, and sort of the art of the change management piece to figure out how are we going to drive this stuff through the organization. So we spend a lot of time trying to find that balance. So one of the things that you have to really look at whenever you're doing these kinds of initiatives, you have to think about who are your stakeholders that you have to deal with. And a lot of times you think of your stakeholders as the people that are just directly involved in your projects. I have to, at the executive level, I have to cast my net much wider than that. I have to first work with the board of directors because that's where my money comes from. So unless I can get the board to give me some funding to be able to do these types of initiatives and really back the whole concept of modernizing our organization, I'm really nowhere. So I see a head nodding there. It's very, very true. You have to start with your board. You have to understand what they think is important. What kind of legacy do they want to leave with the organization? They're not very technically savvy in general, so you have to really work with that group. Your CEO, I report directly to the CEO. He's a new CEO and has come from a different industry than the gaming industry, and he just comes into our organization and cannot believe how archaic our systems are. So we have huge support on that front. But you do need to have whoever is running the ship to be really behind you and moving forward with these initiatives. On the executive side, my peers, I have a number of different people on that executive team that are looking at these initiatives differently. There's some that are directly impacted right away. There's some that are right behind them are going to be using Salesforce right afterwards as we expand out our footprint. So they're sort of sitting back and watching and seeing, okay, how is this going? And then you have the people that you're probably not going to touch a lot. Our organization really our executive team tries to work together to run the company as a team. And so it's very important for me to get all of them on board, all of them understanding the technology, why we're driving it, what business value we're driving into the organization. So they're a key group. Your project team, I think we're all familiar how to pull together a project team. Make sure you have people that are champions for you on your project team, know who your detractors are, those types of things. Your IT department, in some cases, if it's the business side of things that are really driving this, you're going to have to pull along your IT department and get them to understand what the value is that you're trying to drive. You have the employees that are impacted directly by these systems. And then you have your onlookers that are very curious in how that's going over there. And are they losing their job? So it's just, something you have to really keep in mind from a change management perspective. Make sure you cast your net wide to be able to know what you're getting into. Now, in our case, Salesforce has given us the feedback that we must be doing something right in change management because they haven't dealt with a company that has been as easy as us from a change management perspective. So I don't know what we're doing so well, but it seems to be working. I think it's actually a lot to do. I have my main project manager here spends a lot of time in the trenches, he says. So this here, this is an interesting slide. When you're dealing with all those different people that you have casted your net with, and you're talking to them about all the possibilities that you have with doing things with Salesforce, sometimes they're only going to be seeing the little stick man on the side. That's all they can imagine about what business value you can be driving with them. You're sitting there as someone that knows a lot about the system, and you're seeing the Mona Lisa. You're seeing that, wow, we can do so much for this organization. It's going to be fantastic. But you have to understand that if they're only seeing a stick man and that's the only thing that they care about right now, stop, listen to them, and make sure that you provide the stickman first before you start talking about the Mona Lisa. Because if you jump to the Mona Lisa, you will scare them off so quick, it won't even be funny. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. The other thing that I like to think about is the spectrum of change that you're trying to drive through the organization. Salesforce by nature is you can iterate through and make a lot of changes in your organization as you move through time. So in the old way, whenever you had software, you had to sit down, do your requirements end to end, and then you built it. And so you had to spend all this time on requirements. You only had one shot at it, created a lot of stress on everyone to get it right. With Salesforce, you can start out with really just having a little bit of a vision of what your masterpiece is going to be doing for you, and you can build that. Let them touch it, let them feel it, let them be able to experience it, and then you can go on to the next phase. So you can be iterating through the different spectrum of change to be able to get eventually to where you need them to go to. So we had, Joe talked about our security department, and in the lottery side of the business is actually where we've started with our security, and they all are ex-cops. They're very stoic, they're very difficult. And so whenever we started working with them, we started talking to them about Salesforce, and they went, "Are you kidding me? We have a system now that works fine. Just bring us in the new version of that, it'll work fine." Well, the problem was it didn't integrate to a call center, it didn't integrate to our prize payout office, and a whole bunch of different places in the organization. So we didn't want to do that. We wanted to use Salesforce. So we just sat back one day and we said, if we could only call it Police Force and show it to them, they would be fine with that. So Salesforce actually did a great thing for us. They did a mock-up for us of the screen that that would show all the things that a security system could do for them, and they actually put the name Police Force on the top. And I literally think that was the most important change management step we did with that crowd. And they're true believers right now, and they think that Salesforce should do everything in the company now. It's quite funny. So I talked about mock-ups. One of the things that you'll find when you're dealing with people in general is they're not very good at conceptualizing what the future can look like. So again, if they're thinking of the stick man, they're not going to see the Mona Lisa because they can't conceptualize it yet. So with Salesforce, because you have the ability to iterate a whole lot, you can do your mock-ups, they can get in there, they can touch it, they can feel it, they can really get that experience, and it goes such a long way from a change management perspective to help them see where they're going. You could do that in the mock-up stage, you do that in the alpha stage, in the beta stage, so let them keep experiencing it as you go. The other thing that we did with our security department is we hooked them up with another company that was using Salesforce for exact same application. So use your Salesforce partners to be able to get you connected with people that can help you through those change management pieces. When you start using Salesforce, it's all about metrics, right? Salesforce is great about visibility, allows you to have lots of metrics in your organization. It's fantastic. But whenever you're talking to people that are thinking of the stick man, and you start talking to them about metrics and they haven't measured much in their business before, it's really, really, it's like a bomb to them when you say, "So, what are you trying to accomplish in your business?" And they just look at you like, "I don't know, do you think I can't run my business?" And then they really don't want to talk to you anymore. So I think this is really, a really important thing. You drop that metric bomb on them and you really turn them off. So whenever you're thinking about the metrics when you're in that first wave of iteration, do some very, very simple ones. Adoption rates. Just measure how many people get onto the system and how fast that happens. Do that, just have one. And then as you go through, create more and more as they have the ability to understand it more and they're touching it and they get that feel for it much better. So expanding the footprint, where do you go next? You really need to look at the pain points of the organization. You need to find out which of those executives really, really want to change, and you go there first. You have to keep momentum, And as you're expanding through the organization, you're going across those silos, you need to be really clear on what the big picture is and what you're trying to do. So make sure you're painting that picture for them of not just this project right here, but where are you taking the whole business in the long run, and how does that look, and what does that roadmap look like? It's really important for them to hang their hat and really understand what you're trying to do, what's next, what's why and why it's happening that way. The other thing that I thought was really interesting for us is that we say through the process that, yeah, Salesforce is great. Don't worry about getting it all right the first time. Just get in there and make it happen. We're going to come back and we're going to help you. Well, culturally, we hadn't done that before. So we have always just gone in and built it and then walked away. So when we went through the budget planning process, we actually didn't even include any money to go back in and help them, even though we committed to them that we would. So we had to, at last minute, throw in some more money, put that into our plan. But culturally, it wasn't something we even thought about doing. So you need to have a way to figure out how you're going to work through the demand in the organization, because as you have more success, more things will need to be done. You can create all kinds of governance structures, and you should do that for sure. But never forget the art that has to go around all this stuff. Make sure you're communicating. Make sure you're painting the picture. Don't try to get too much done all at once. Work through it slowly. So our lesson learned is you have to take care of your multiple stakeholders, listening to all of them, understanding where they're at. Don't expect your Mona Lisa to start. Lots of times what you'll have in a project is you're iterating, you might switch roles. So your IT department will lead at some point to say, okay, here's what the technology can offer, and then the business will start leading because they understand where they want to take the business. So it flips back and forth. I often hear IT departments say, oh, we can't do anything until the business tells us what they want. Sometimes the IT department needs to lead in that case, and vice versa is true as well. The business needs to take a lead role. Help them conceptualize mock-ups, get them to go look at systems, work through it. Even just going on the Salesforce site to have them look at when you first start talking about really helps the conceptualization. Beware of your metric bomb, and always remember it's science and an art. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynette. Joe. Just letting you know, there's an online survey that you can enter to win iPod Nano. And also, we have microphones set up for people who want to ask questions. Feel free to either stand up. If you can't reach the microphone, you can raise your hand, and I'll try to repeat your question so people can hear. Any questions for Lynette or for Joe? Oh, yes. So the question is about deploying some of the newly announced social media features.
Yeah, it was interesting. We watched this morning, and I kept leaning over to Kent saying, I want that. Because it's becoming more and more important to us. We're not in that space near as much as we can. We do have chat lines on a chat function on our bingo, online bingo, but very, very just skimming the top. So it's definitely something we'll look at.
Other questions? I have one question for you, Lynette. What would you say is sort of the biggest... You did talk about lessons learned, but maybe sort of the biggest mistake that you've seen people make in this sort of process, the kind of pitfalls that people can try to avoid when they're thinking about this change management and governance process?
I think the biggest thing that we've learned through it is really trying to paint that longer-term big picture. It's really easy to initiate and kick off your projects, your initial projects as you start getting out there, but as you're trying to deploy these systems, and Joe talked about how they weave through the organization, and because there's so much complexity in working across different departments and divisions and workflows, if there's not a clearer vision of how that's working together and where it's taking you to, a lot of things just get really mucky for everyone to understand.
That's a great takeaway. In fact, I've heard from other customers that Salesforce is a little bit seductive in that way that how easy it is to start doing new things and different things. And it's very easy to start building things out without necessarily having the long view from a change management perspective, but also maybe architecturally, perhaps from the security or the sharing model or the data model, maybe not thinking long term with that architecture. So that's a really great takeaway. Do we have any other questions from the audience before we close? Yes, sir.
In your applications, did you have to, you said start small and then don't overcommit and all that stuff. Did you have to think monolithic application? Did you have to sort of slice out functionality from it? If that's the case, how did you manage that with, saying, okay, I got this one thing that does a lot of stuff, and now I'm just going to pull one function out of that, deprecating that whole stuff?
We're right in the middle of that right now, and I'll let Joe answer it.
Yeah, we've got, as I call it, a lot of technical debt. And really it's working with Lynette's organization and figuring out where the business wants to go and then mapping that back to some of our systems and applications. And so if we want to be able to do X, well then we need to be able to have these sequences in order to deprecate this workflow or deprecate these systems before we go live. And so really stopping sort of the bolt-on or hamburger helper approach. And so as opposed to saying we can deliver something in 90 days as an example, because it's easy with Salesforce if you don't have some of that legacy hanging around. But in order to do it right, it may take 6 months. And so it's a lot of back and forth with the business and a lot of negotiation. So I hope I answered your questions. It's really trying to figure out what the next step is and then mapping that back to some of our applications.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. That's right.
Are you seeing a lot of customers doing it, both manage the migration from technical debt, but also leverage assets?
Okay, so the question is about basically integrating with existing technical assets and managing migrations. I think the first thing I'll mention, and I'll let Joe respond to this as well, is that we do have a lot of customer examples where they do integrations at multiple layers, like as you were saying, at the UI layer, at a mashup, at a logic layer, and also at a data layer. There are some great examples of this in a book called Connecting the Clouds, which you can get at the Expo if you have already seen that. So I think that would be a good starting point to sort of see what other customers are doing with respect to integrating with existing systems and assets. Joe, did you have any comments about sort of how you would migrate or integrate with existing technical assets that maybe you don't want to retire yet?
Do you want to know the sort of the technical nomenclature or how you would prioritize doing that? Okay.
It's more, for example, how often you do an integration that may be throwaway in the long run. But that you do it in order to leverage something you have to get out.
Yeah. My rule of thumb is sort of level of effort. If you could actually drive significant business value in, say, 90 days, even though it's a disposable solution and you know that, go for it. Because with these types, through SOA, through web services, it's pretty easy to get up and running. And especially if you are integrating two technical assets, maybe you take 120 days so that it's not disposable. But if you're integrating to something that is sort of going to be deprecated over the course of the next 12 or 24 months, so I use the 90-day window. Yeah.
Thanks for the question. Anything else? I'll be up here. I think our speakers probably hang around for a little while if you want to come and talk to us. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending. Enjoy the show.
Thank you.